All right, everybody. We are going live here on Twitter and YouTube following the Knicks and Pacers. Knicks find a way to stay alive. 2-1, down 2-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Pacers still up in that one. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals. And it's been long enough. We got to start digging into the Celtics offseason. We've tried to push it as much as we can here with life circumstances and everything else, but there's just no avoiding it. So we're going to dive into today. We'll let you know how we're going to set this up and kind of walk you through scenario by scenario of what might just happen this offseason here and let you know our thoughts on that. So if you guys are joining us here live, make sure you are dropping your questions in the chat. And you guys know the deal. It's Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will. We are checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. Happy Sunday evening of Memorial Day weekend to you, my friend.
Some good basketball that we just watched, man. I know you were at the hospital with your newborn, but when you got back, you tuned in to the fourth quarter of the Karl Anthony Towns game where he brought the Knicks back from the brink of elimination, and the Knicks somehow, for the fourth time this postseason, come back from a 20-point deficit. Maybe it's just the third time, but regardless, the Knicks survived 2-1.
Yeah,
I don't
Greg,
know where do the Pacers play now? Do they don't play at Conseco Fieldhouse anymore? What's the name?
Yeah,
the arena?
I don't know, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, some shit like that. And yeah, Greg, let's slow your roll on all these 20-point comebacks. It was only a 14-point comeback in Game 4 against the Celtics. Okay. Let's get the facts straight here. If we're gonna be, if we're gonna make sure we're going down this road again. But dude, this series has been awesome. Game 1 is probably a game I'll never forget. Like, that was one of the craziest things. You woke up to two different text threads that we're in, where one I was talking to myself, and in the other one it was me and our buddy Liptak, who's been on here, just going back and forth throughout the entire ending of that game. This series, just specifically looking at this Eastern Conference Finals, is a couple things. One, like you said, good basketball. It's been fun. The Pacers are, I feel like, they're just they're expected, but so unexpected at the same time. Like, I just don't know what's coming. Is Ben Shepherd and Obi Toppin close in one game? All of a sudden, Tony Bradley's out there. Like, I don't even know where Rick Carlisle's pulling these different cards from. And then today, Tibbs kind of tried to mimic him, right? Like you said, I missed parts of the game. All of a sudden, I turned it on and I was like, "What am I missing here?" That Landry Shamet and Darrell Wright are in the game with 9 minutes to go, and the Knicks are making a run. Like, what's happening? Like, this series is really fun, really hard to really, make any type of definitive statement. And then from a Celtics perspective, Greg, to me, it just feels like, I know now we've moved on and we're resigned to Jaylen's got a torn meniscus, mystery illness for KP. We, obviously devastating injury with Tatum. By the end of the day, man, I really just look back like, man, we fucked up. Yeah, we done fucked up. That's is really what it comes back to.
Big time. Yeah. When you see the way that the Pacers played the first two games, and for most of this game until the Knicks just shut the faucet off in that fourth quarter. It's just like there were so many opportunities for the Celtics to attack the Knicks defense where we just didn't do it. We talked about how in Game 5, that was the one game in which the Celtics played a style that was not conducive for the Knicks defense, right? Every other game, we walked the ball up, we played ISO, we shot too many threes, we let the Knicks stay in one or two rotations. We never bent the defense or anything like that. The Pacers are going to play the Pacers pace, and credit to the Knicks defense, because what they were able to do tonight to shut off that team, granted, the first part of the comeback happened with Halliburton on the bench and Rick Carlisle, to your point about lineups and who knows what the hell's going on. He went a little too long with his bench, and he allowed the Knicks to get back in the game with Karl Towns doing his thing. Towns was awesome in that second half tonight.
Kills me.
Yeah, I mean, gotta give credit where credit's due, man. This was a great Cat game.
Well, he had 4 points going into the third quarter. This is the
Yeah.
thing with this Knicks team is like,
Foul
you know,
trouble.
it's and it's also like this was Bridges against the Celtics, right? Bridges played okay for games 1 and 2 through 3 quarters, and then was just unreal in the fourth quarter and overtime. Same thing with Cat in this game, you know, foul trouble, you know, not taking great shots, and then all of a sudden just has 20 points or 20 plus points, whatever he had, you know, in the fourth quarter. And I texted our buddy about this texted Liptak about this the other day. How many times is he going to wince up and down the court? How many times is he going to do his over exaggerated limp? That over exaggerated limp that he does kills me every single time. It's so overdone.
I love how locked in you are to Cat's body language. It's so funny
because it's so insane to me. It's like I don't understand how I just don't understand how his mind works. And then all of a sudden he'll like start trying to flex, and it's like, dude, that's not you. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he had a great fourth quarter. That's all that really matters and he hit probably the biggest shot of the game was that 3-pointer that he hit, kind of, you know, with 2 guys coming out at him. Like that was a huge shot for the Knicks that really kind of put them over the top in that fourth. And, you know, looking ahead here just for the rest of the series, Greg, Pacers have been your team all year. You know, you thought, you know, and I missed parts of the middle of this game, but you texted me, Knicks are cooked. You were ready for the season to be over. Where do you see the series going here as you've been a little bit more locked into it than I have?
I just think the Pacers, I mean, my prediction was Pacers in 6. That's how I see this one happening. I thought the Knicks may have found something just by not playing campaign. Because there have been far too many campaign moments over the first 2 games of this series and over the playoffs. And the fact that they went to Landry Shamet, who I know you've always liked, he definitely is better than
that. I don't know if I've always been a Landry Shamet fan, but
yeah, but I mean, okay, we can both agree that Landry Shamet's probably a better player than Campaign, right? And
I would agree with that.
sorry for putting the Landry Shamet love on you. I thought I remembered you saying that you thought he was better than like what the NBA seems to think of him. Last time we talked about Landry Shamet whenever we were on the pod.
Well,
but anyways,
I know real quick. I know what you're saying. I think a couple years ago, he just kept ending up on playoff teams, and it was like, there's got to be something to this guy because he was playing in almost all these series up until the last couple years. But at the end of the day, I just don't want to be labeled as a Landry Shamet guy because that's not a hill I want to be a part of.
That's fair. Totally fair. Sorry for putting that on you.
That's it happens.
But they played DeLon Wright. You called him Darrell Wright earlier.
Right, I noticed that, dude. I mix it up every single time.
That's okay. That just shows you how far down like most people's brain he is. And the fact that he was on the court with Shamet, McBride, Cat, and was it Josh Hart? And Josh Hart.
Yeah.
Like that was the 5 that brought the Knicks back. And I don't know how it happened. Tibbs was, after not playing Cat in the fourth quarter of the last game, said, you know what, Jaylen Brunson, I know you got 5 fouls, but I'm just going to wait until we absolutely need you to put you on the court. I'm going to wait till there are 90 seconds left in this game to put you back in there because he liked what was happening on defense. And I can't really blame him because Brunson's not a good defender. The Pacers have been targeting him the entire series. They got him in foul trouble back-to-back games, and he didn't look good on offense tonight. He was not reading the game right. Nesmith, until Nesmith rolled his ankle, was playing great defense on him. Nembhard seemed to have his rhythm figured out a little bit more in this one, and the Pacers were just showing Brunson a ton of bodies. He kept getting into the paint and then not really knowing what to do. He was unable to get to that little step back shot that he goes to, the little reverse pivot fadeaway he goes to. They took that away. So he would get into the middle of the paint, not really have a plan, and then pass the ball out to the wings. And when he was making those passes, a few times he had some really careless turnovers and just didn't look comfortable all night. So shout out to the Pacers for figuring that out. Shout out to Tibbs for recognizing his defense was what was going to win him this game, and then finally getting Brunson back in the game after the Karl Towns magic ran out.
Both coaches have been super ballsy in this series, right? They both made some calls that you could easily go back and question, but have, you know, worked out, and at times not worked out, but they're going for it, right? Like they're making whatever they think is the best decision at that time. And, you know, we're getting ready to transition here and talk a little bit about the Celtics offseason. For those of you tuning in, we're going to kind of set the scene, and then we're going to do basically part 1 of what will be probably about a 4 or 5 part series where we really want to kind of go through scenario by scenario. Specifically, we know trades are coming, but It's just who's going out, what they might look like. So we're going to try to take that step by step, and we're going to start tonight with Jaylen Brown. It's a little teaser there. So we're going to start with that tonight. But before we get to that, Greg, you mentioned Aaron Nesmith. I just want you to because you were loving on Aaron Nesmith, and then you somehow missed his heater in game one. But you were loving what you were seeing from Aaron Nesmith even before that. So I know at one point you texted that I'm paraphrasing here, where it was kind of killing you to see Nesmith do so well, especially just knowing, like, obviously the series that we're coming from as Celtics fans. So tell me where you're at watching Aaron Nesmith in this series be such a crucial part of what the Pacers are doing 2 games away from an NBA Finals appearance.
Here's my thing with Nesmith. If he was billed as a defensive stopper energy guy coming out of college, I don't know that the Celtics necessarily would have been like so willing to move off of him, because he was billed as a 3-point guy, and then he just could never find his 3-pointer with the Celtics. And in an offense that required him to shoot 3-pointers, he was unable to do that, right? You obviously have to give something up to get something. So Nesmith was kind of the key there in that trade in order to get Brogdon, who then got us Drew Holiday. But it still just like hurts to see Nesmith be this great of a defender, because he seems to be one of the, I mean, Stan Van Gundy kept calling it out on the broadcast. He was like, I don't think that I've seen a perimeter player navigate screens and fight over screens as well as Aaron Nesmith is doing in this series and in these playoffs. And to see him just be this level of defender, 25 years old, starting to hit 3-pointers, I think he was around 40% this year. He had that crazy game one. And
insane. I've never seen anything like that. That was one of the most insane things ever.
Yeah, my Pacers buddies are just like, he's awesome. Like he's making, $15 million a year, maybe less than that. And I think he's one of those guys that, unfortunately, the Celtics, had to give up to get something. We got a championship out of it. So I'm never gonna, stress too much about it. But it would be nice to have Aaron Smith on the Celtics. Let's just say that.
So here, one, I'll be honest, like, I just love watching Aaron Nesmith. I don't feel anything, remorse. Like you said, he led to Malcolm Brogdon, who led to Drew Holiday. So ultimately, that's a win. But I do think Aaron Nesmith is actually an important lesson for this upcoming Celtics offseason. Because when you think back to that trade of trading Nesmith for Brogdon, it was kind of like, yeah, there's still a little bit of potential, but you take that trade for Brogdon all day, right? And I think there was one other first-round pick, and that was essentially the trade, right? It was like a late first in Aaron Nesmith for Malcolm Brogdon, and then you filled in some salary. So I think for the Celtics, when we start to really get into a lot of these trades here, most of them are not going to feel like great returns. And I think the best returns that they're going to get player-wise, now picks-wise, depending on which scenario we're talking about, that will vary greatly. But I think player-wise, especially when we get to the Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis scenarios, it's going to be guys that kind of fit what Aaron Nesmith was at the time that the Celtics traded him, where it's a late lottery pick, first-round guy that's shown a little bit, but a team is just like, listen, there's not a place for him here, or we don't want to pay him. And that's going to be some of the stuff that the Celtics are going to have to try to really hit on. So I do think Aaron Nesmith is a good lesson for Celtics fans to keep in mind when some of these trades and some of these rumors start to come out and we start to see what this looks like, because it's gonna be real interesting here, folks. That's all I can say, is looking around at this and trying to break down what this off season could be. It's gonna be real interesting. So with that, Greg, let's transition for right now. We'll come back at the end of the show. We'll talk a little bit about the Western Conference Finals, give our quick thoughts on that. But the Celtics off season, we knew that this was coming, where there was going to be a crunch. There was going to be, decisions that had to be made, basically win or lose. Even if the Celtics had won the championship, we still might be having these discussions. It might be a little different. But if they weren't going to win the NBA Finals, we knew that changes were coming in some form. The biggest thing that changed is Jason Tatum, right? That injury completely changed it. So as we start to look ahead to the offseason, either what's the most important thing to you, or what's the most interesting thing to you when we start to break down what may happen here over these next couple of weeks and months?
I think the most interesting thing to me is the idea that I have no idea what this roster is going to look like next
Yeah.
year. Right. So, like, to some degree, I'm a little bit excited to see what we have to talk about this summer and what we have to watch on the court next year. Because it's felt like, you know, obviously when you get Drew Holiday and you get Kristaps Porzingis, that adds enough of newness into the basketball that you're watching just to get excited about it. But it's like, it's weird, like, in this in this society that we live in where everything is just like so 24-hour news cycle, it feels that way with basketball as well, where like I'm kind of ready to move on from this iteration of the Celtics, even though for the last 2 years it's some of the best basketball I've ever seen in my life, right? And I think for me, it's what's most interesting to me is how I'm going to react to whatever ends up happening. Because I have no idea what's going to happen. I think that's what's going to be
Right.
fun about these conversations. But I'm kind of open to anything, and I think that's kind of a fun place to be at as a fan, even though it sucks to be in this position, potentially having to blow it up.
Right. And this is the point of the Jason Tatum injury, is that there was a few options. Now anything's on the table, right? Now at least anything and everything has to be considered. I think, whether they lost and Jason Tatum was healthy in the last round, or they somehow made a comeback and they lose in the conference finals or lose the final, whatever happens, rest it doesn't matter. Like, you knew there was still a couple concrete things that probably were not happening. Now at least the door is kind of open on that. And what I think is so fascinating is, to your point of the unknown, there's so many different paths, and one domino is going to lead to another that we just don't even see coming. So, like, I think in my mind, there's a very clear option A for Brad, and this is with not knowing what other teams are going to do. If you're just looking at the Celtics scenario, it's okay. We're roughly, we need to shed some salary, and we need to try to do it without having to hemorrhage picks and or take on longer term contracts or players that we don't want that are going to be here and mess up our timeline later on. And so option A is basically some combination of Holiday, Porzingis, and Hauser. Let's try to trade them, save money, and get some type of assets that keep us in a good financial position moving forward and don't have us hemorrhaging picks, so that we can make moves when Jason Tatum returns, and we keep Tatum, Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and we kind of go from there. Like, I feel like that's the easy option A, but every team knows that, and every team is going to be able to leverage that against the Celtics. And so, and it's going to change a lot depending on what else happens. And so it's kind of fascinating to see what Brad Stevens does in this situation, because it's unprecedented, right? Because this is really the first team that is feeling the true squeeze of this second apron, of this new CBA. And it's really, really difficult to navigate. And it's probably going to be a string of multiple moves that ultimately lead us to wherever we're going. And to your point, we really don't know where that's going to be. So
yeah, and I don't want
go
to
ahead, Greg.
step on the Drew Holiday content that we're gonna have later this week, but like I'm already seeing the let's bring Marcus Smart back to Boston,
I've seen that a
trade
couple
out Drew
times.
Holiday, and then you do save about $15 million there, and I don't know how much Marcus has left in his tank, but I don't know if I want to see that reunion, to be honest with you. There's
I like the
also
memories we have.
yeah, I like the memories we have. That's a good way to put it. And then you're seeing things like Kristaps Porzingis for Nick Vucevic. Like these are the types of trades that are out there where like you're downgrading in talent for a better contract money wise. And you're ending up saving, like, every dollar is 8 times the dollar right now.
Right.
So you're saving a shit ton of money by getting off of, Porzingis and Holiday and bringing in lesser players at a lesser dollar.
Yeah. So just to kind of set this up here, I'm using Bobby Marks every time a team's eliminated, kind of goes through their financials. So with the Celtics here, free agents that they have, and we'll get to free agents will kind of be the last thing that we get to, because the Celtics really can't do much except for with these couple of guys. And it's Al Horford, it's Luke Cornett, it's Torrey Craig, and potentially Drew Peterson. And so we'll get to that later on. That will be at the end of all of this, because that's going to be a little bit before we get there. But really the main thing to the money aspect of it here. So the Celtics projected salary next year is $231 million. The second apron is $207.8 million. First apron, $195.9, tax threshold, $187.8. And with all that, projected they're going to pay $263 million in tax. So the tax is actually going to cost more than the freaking team, which is pretty insane to think about. So one of the numbers to kind of keep in mind here is getting under that second apron, because in that second apron, that's where, as you're constructing all these trades, whether you're on Spot Track or you're on, one of these other websites, I recommend Spot Track. I think Spot Track's probably the best one. I really like what they've done. You can set it to this calendar year or to the next calendar year. Is that a lot of the limitations are you can't aggregate salary. I mean, you can't put salary together to go do anything. You can take back less, but you have to make it work for the other team. So there's just going to be a lot of difficulties. And aside from just is this new ownership group, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw, we got a new Indian oil, I don't know if it's oil or steel tycoon, I can't remember, but came in as now a part of the Bill Chisholm group. So we got more money coming in, which is nice. Okay. But it's not just the money. It's going to be what Brad Stevens can and cannot do because of all the restrictions. So it goes beyond just, does this group want to pay all this money for a mediocre team next year and wait it out? It's going to be about Brad Stevens trying to make this team not just good for next year, but for all the years coming. So with that, let's start to kind of get into this here, Greg. And like I said to everybody earlier, we're going to try and pace this out because there's a bunch of different scenarios. And I think the first one that we're going to start with today, which is Jaylen Brown, was only opened because of the Jason Tatum injury. I don't really think we're having this conversation if Jason Tatum doesn't get injured. But now that you're missing an entire year of the Jays, it at least, I think, presents a potential of this happening. So here's where I want to start, Greg, before we get into kind of a few mock trades that we can throw around. And those of you that are listening, if you guys have some mock trades, definitely throw them in the chat here or send them to our email, celticsnoise@gmail.com. We can check them out that way. We'd love to do that. So not just for Jaylen Brown right now, but we're going to do an episode on Drew Holiday. We've got one on KP coming up. We'll do one with Derek White, and then we'll kind of hit everybody else. Will kind of gather in the same grouping at a later date. So if you guys have those, definitely send those along. But Greg, here's where I want to start. I want us to kind of talk about why trading Jaylen Brown, what's the case for it? And then I want us to talk about the case against it. And then we can talk about, a few mock examples. So let's start for the case of why this actually is something that is now on the table.
Okay, I think the only way you trade Jaylen Brown is if you decide we're getting under the tax threshold, right? Because you can pretty much get there by getting Jaylen's money off the books. The trade that's out there, do you want me to throw that trade out there right now? Because I can do it if you want.
Well, save it for 1 minute, because I think, unless you have more to say, because I want to add to what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm saying that's the only way I would trade Jaylen Brown, is if we decide we're getting under any tax implications, we're going 100% rebuild next year, we're tanking, right? If that's the decision that the ownership wants, fine. But if you're trading Jaylen Brown for a lesser player that makes $30 million instead of $55 million or whatever it would be, to me, that's not the route that I want to even entertain. I think it's we're saying this is the end of the Jays if we trade Jaylen Brown. Yeah. I don't want to go into some weird, we're still trying to be okay and trade Jaylen Brown for a lesser player with less money. That's not what I'm about with Jaylen Brown. And I don't want to trade JB at all.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say that up front, because I don't think either of us want to. This is not a great conversation, but it is a conversation that needs to be had. And so to that point, Greg, I created a JB manifesto. Okay. I created 3 rules to trading Jaylen Brown. My rule is you have to hit at least 2 of these 3 to even consider it. Doesn't mean you do it, but you have to hit 2 out of these 3. And if you don't, you just walk away. You don't even think about it. You just hang up the phone. That's a bad deal. Nobody wins. You got to hit at least 2 of these 3. So here's the 3 things that I came up with if we must trade Jaylen Brown. Number 1, as you mentioned, it has to be about the money, right? So using Bobby Marks examples of what it looks like for the tax, basically, and this is all kind of estimated, and we know other moves are going to happen. And so obviously, there's shades of gray to each of these rules depending on what the other things are that are coming back in the trade. From saving money perspective, I feel like you have to be at least somewhere in that 12 to 15 million range so that it's pretty easy to get under that second level. If it doesn't get you there just in one move, it's got to put you right on the precipice. So that's number 1 for me. You have to save a substantial amount of money that then frees you up going forward, so that when Jason Tatum comes back, because that's the thing that you have to keep in mind here, Greg, is each move you make needs to then set you up to be better equipped when Jason Tatum gets back. And I'm just kind of assuming Tatum's out all of next year. So maybe he comes back early. If he does, great. But I'm operating under that assumption that it's just a lost year. So when he comes back, you have to be ready. So that's number one. Number two, in a player return, if you're going for a trade of Jaylen Brown, it's going to bring you back more players than it is, maybe it's not going to save you a ton of money, save you some money. But if you're trying to really get a player that you think is a good value to send out Jaylen Brown, it has to be somebody that you believe can be in their prime by 2026-27, that can actually be somebody that can ride alongside with Jason Tatum, if you will, right? That can replace Jaylen Brown, because that's the hardest part of this. Is if you're trading Jaylen Brown, like you said, you're quitting on the Jays era, and we don't know what Jason Tatum's going to look like when he comes back. So you need to have somebody that is somewhere in that range where Jaylen Brown is, of the 15th to 25th-ish best player. You still need somebody in that range if you're making that move, or someone you believe that with a little bit of seasoning, maybe on the way to that level, is coming back for Jaylen Brown if you're going to trade him. So that's stipulation number two, or number two option. Number three here, and this comes into draft picks. If you're getting a draft pick package back for Jaylen Brown, it needs to be enough value that it either puts you in the conversation for not necessarily Giannis, but whoever the next Giannis is, or whoever the next superstar level player is, that you got these really valuable picks, that all of a sudden you're in that conversation and you can pair that person with Jason Tatum. Or it has to be such a draft pick heavy return that now all of a sudden it's setting you up for the post J era, right? That you're going, maybe not full Oklahoma City, because no one's getting there, but you're getting so many picks back that you're like, listen, we don't know what that next move is going to be. We hope that we have something for Jason Tatum, but this is going to set us up to continue being a team that's always in the mix. And so for me, I think you got to hit two out of those three if you're trading Jaylen Brown, and that's to consider it, not to do it. That's to consider it. And if you're getting one of those three or less of those, you just absolutely cannot do it.
Can I add one thing to the manifesto? You got to trade him out west. I don't want him in the Eastern Conference.
Interesting. So, okay, is that just like a personal, I don't want to see JB as often thing, or what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, if say we trade him to the Nets, because that's a team that could absorb Jaylen's money. I'm okay with that, just because the Nets aren't going to do anything, and I don't think they'll ever be good. But I don't want to see Jaylen on a shit team. But trading him out west, I just don't want to have to run into him in the playoffs. We've seen over the last couple of years how good Jaylen Brown can be as a two-way force in the playoffs. Can you imagine a scenario in which Jason Tatum is playing Jaylen Brown in an Eastern Conference semifinals, and we just have to watch that and have them guard each other? It would be great theater, but I don't want to see that, man. Get Jaylen Brown as far away from the Celtics as possible, if that's the road that you take. Because he's one of those dudes that I think Celtics fans, I know Celtics fans love Jaylen Brown, as shown by, them showing up to his rover, the white noise rover, whatever pop-up they had
those, by the way.
Those are fresh.
Is it just shoes. Me? Are those? Is it old school T-Max or Iversons that those have a vibe to?
A little bit of Iverson to them. Actually, a little bit of the Steph Currys that came out maybe 5-6 years ago. But definitely have some Iverson to them for sure. But I just think we got to trade him out west if we trade him. I would give me the Jaylen and Ime reunion. I'd be okay with that.
All right. Well, you said the Ime reunion, so. Should we get into a couple of mock trades here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I've got one that's to the Rockets, and this was one that just full transparency, Kevin O'Connor brought up. And at first I was repulsed by it. I was like, what is he talking about? But there is a caveat to it. So I mentioned before, if you go to Spot Track, you can kind of set the league year of 24-25 or 25-26. And that's when most of these trades are going to be made. And I don't know when the calendar exactly flips. So this particular trade that KOC on his podcast brought up, I started thinking about it more, and it can only be made in a very specific window, I think, between the end of the season and maybe right before the draft or right on draft. It's a week window. and it's to the Rockets. And the trade would be as follows here: Jaylen Brown to the Rockets, Fred VanVleet's team option, or Fred VanVleet and Tari Eason to the Celtics, and then the Rockets have some pretty nice first round picks. So for some of these trades, I'm just gonna say you hash out picks later. For this particular one, there's very specific picks that need to come back, and there's Houston has the 10th pick this year. They have an unprotected from Phoenix in 27. They have an unprotected from Dallas in 29. They've got a few others from some other teams that can be thrown in there. So there's like 4 or 5 really nice picks that can be put in there.
Nice
and so what makes this trade appealing right now is that if it's made before the calendar flips, the Celtics can actually just decline Fred VanVleet's team option. And so essentially $44 million just come off the books. So this is the move that you get as many of their best draft picks as you can. You get completely off of all that $40+ million. Like all of your financial problems basically go away with this move. Like all of them. Like, and so everything else that we're talking about, you can now deal from a position of not necessarily leverage, but you can't be leveraged against your position. You know, when you're trading Drew Holiday, because that 3 years with Drew Holiday, just as an example, that's the toughest part about trying to move him this offseason. So everyone's going to say, fine, even if I want him, give me a pick, because I'm taking 3 years and $105 million for a guy that got worse last year and is only getting older. Right. So that's the hardest part about moving that. So now you could, sit on that for another year. You can let KPs expire. You don't have to force yourself to do moves that you don't want to do to save money. And so with that, you then get all these picks. I threw in Tari Eason because I need a player. I like Tari Eason. He's a guy that you could see having value. So this is a move that I think would hit 2 out of the 3. I still probably wouldn't do this, to be honest, but it does intrigue me that you're just completely taking care of all of your finances in one move, like pretty severely. And you're going to potentially set yourself up with a top 10 pick this year, and then 3 to 4 really good potential unprotected picks from teams that are really in a bind, whether it's Phoenix, Dallas, once they get out of their 3-year window that Nico Harrison has them in. There's a couple teams in there that could be really appealing. And so whether the Celtics keep them, or to my point earlier, those then become, I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Like, I don't know who else would be the next Giannis that we would have room for, but it's like, man, now we can take those 3 picks plus some of our picks, and all of a sudden we're in the mix for a guy that could actually be ready to play with Jason Tatum. So
right.
I didn't love that idea at first, warmed up to it. I don't think I would do that, but that would be something that I could understand the thought process behind.
Yeah, I would probably need Reed Shepherd in that deal.
Okay.
If I'm going to do that. But I think just getting VanVleet to cut him, that's exactly what I was referring to earlier when I said, should I bring up the trade and the team? Just because it just makes sense. If the goal is to, plan for Jason Tatum's first year back from his injury, this is what makes sense, because staying in the aprons just restricts so many things that the Celtics are able to do. There are some really harsh penalties that comes from being in the second apron multiple years in a row. So the Celtics need to figure out a way to get out of the second apron as soon as possible. This gets them, to your point, under the tax, right, Will? If they did this deal,
this gets you well under the tax. So
under the tax.
Using the Bobby Marks, projections here. So 231, that takes you, out of the first and second. You're still slightly over the tax, but almost everyone's going to be, over the tax to a certain degree. There's only a few teams that are going to be completely under the tax. So this brings you all the way from.
You get there by then doing a separate deal. You trade Sam Hauser or something like that.
Right. Or you can aggregate salaries, and now you can actually make moves. You know what I mean? You can actually, like, Brad Stevens can actually GM. Like right now, Brad Stevens is trying to GM with maybe not just one, but two hands behind his back, right? Like he doesn't have a lot of room to be able to do much. And so that's why I'm curious to see how much of a magician he really is, because it's going to be a really telling offseason as to, just how special, because he's hitting at like a 95% hit rate, right? Like Brad hasn't made any moves that you really look at and you're like, I mean, honestly, the Drew Holiday contract might be his worst move. Like if we're just being real about it, that might be the worst move. And no one thought that at the time, but looking at it now, it's just tougher to swallow. So it'll be interesting. And yeah, that's the move. That's the only move I've seen so far that just 100% takes care of all your financial issues, you reset, and then it gives you some versatility to kind of build from there and see where you end up. To your point, a lot of this is then going to lead to the unknown, but now you have more room to move. So that's an interesting one. What else you got? You got another one for us?
No, I mean I'm going off of your document here. So you keep walking us through the trades. You were having some fun putting these trades together. So keep going.
Yeah, I've had a lot of time to pass while I've been just chilling at the hospital, so I've been looking through it. So let's go to one here that I have that would be more focused on the player return. It would save you some money, but it would be more focused on the player return. And this is probably, I think I have 3 different Jaylen Brown trades on here. This is probably the one that, at least from a player perspective, I'm curious to get your thoughts on. And this is from the Celtics and Grizzlies here. So for this one, I mentioned earlier, with some draft capital, I don't know. We'll figure it out. There's probably draft capital one way or another in this. You could make an argument either way. This is going to have to get hashed out which way the draft picks are going. But let's just focus on the player aspect of it here for this one, Greg. Celtics and Grizzlies, Jaylen Brown to the Grizz, keeping him out west like you wanted. And for the Celtics, they're going to save $10 million on this deal. They're going to take back Desmond Bane and Zach Edey. For the Celtics, Desmond Bane, solid player. We had him, I think, somewhere around the top 5, third best options in the league. Certainly not at the Jaylen Brown level, but it's a guy that, if the Celtics are really high on, they technically drafted him back in the day. If it's someone that they're really high on, they could see he's, going to keep you at a fits Missoula ball, keeps you at a certain level. And then Zach Edey, Celtics are going to need reinforcements on the front line. KP's got a mystery illness, $30 million expiring. Al Horford, maybe he's back, maybe he's not. Either way, he's getting old. Luke Cornett might cost too much to even come back. So Zach Edey, younger guy, honestly, not really my cup of tea. I don't love Zach Edey, but younger guy, all NBA rookie. It seems like he's got a place here. Give me your thoughts. Obviously, I'm not really selling this super well, so I'll let you give your thoughts on it.
Looking this guy up right now because I know he's your boy. This is your boy. You cannot deny this. Santi Aldama.
That's my boy.
I'm surprised Santi Aldama is not in this trade. Just because I know how much you love him. It looks like he's a restricted free agent, so there would be some issues with that.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean Desmond Bane's okay. He's like a decent player. I think the argument would be that he like really fits Missoula ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jaylen's lack of a 3-point shot has kind of reared its ugly head at times. So that would be the argument for it. Bane's not a great defender. He like looks like he might be just because he's so ripped, but he's undersized, like height wise. He's not a 2-way guy like Jaylen is. The thing about Jaylen, as many kind of like warts as we see, the more you shine that like 82 game ultraviolet light on him, it's just like he's great in the playoffs. Jaylen Brown's awesome. Like I always expect Jaylen Brown to show up when it matters most. As the number 1 option on a team, we'll finally get a chance to see it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see it this year, to see how good Jaylen Brown can really be. Because he's never had the chance. He's never had the opportunity to be the number 1 guy on a team, right? So I want to see that.
What's your gut feeling of Jaylen Brown as a number 1 option?
I think there's going to be a very steep learning curve. But if we just use it as an opportunity for him to grow and we say this is the Jaylen Brown becomes the number 1 guy, either because we don't know what Jason Tatum is going to look like when he comes back from injury and we might have to make like a weird decision there, or as a future trade asset, because if Jaylen Brown proves he can be a great number 1 guy, maybe there's a team around the league like the Rockets or somebody like that that's like, oh, actually, you know what? If we just plug him in and he's the hub of our offense, actually everything else around it makes sense.
Right, and that's the Rockets. Back to the Rockets trade for a second. That's their whole thing is like, well, hey, if we're just trading out Fred VanVleet for Jaylen Brown, it's a win for us if we think we're that close being a 2 seed. But I think it's funny, as you say, we're going to see Jaylen Brown as a number 1 option. Man, is next year going to be, if you don't trade Jaylen Brown this offseason, next season is going to be a massive swing in what his value is. If he falls flat, it's going to go just straight in the tank trying to move him after that. But on the flip, if, because let's just play it out real quick. if the Celtics run this back in some whatever shape it looks like, and Jaylen Brown is the face of it, and he's got, at least Derek White, maybe a few others. And let's say the Celtics in a weakened East, right? Like, we don't know what the Cavs are going to do. Giannis is probably going somewhere, and if not, they're still not very good. Like, the Pistons and Magic are on the way up, but depending on who the Celtics keep, like, they should still be formidable, right? They should still be somewhere in that 3 to 6, 7 range. Like, there's area for that. And so if Jaylen Brown all of a sudden,
go ahead, Will, finish your thought. Sorry.
I was going to say, if Jaylen Brown does keep the Celtics in that 3-4 range and finishes, second, third team All NBA, that's probably going to be the highest his value is ever going to be. Mm-hmm. So it's just such a dramatic swing either way.
Yeah, and we're going to find out a lot about Jaylen Brown. Like that's what it is. Like, if Jaylen Brown is who everyone that is the argument, Jaylen Brown is better than Jason Tatum, like, that argument still is out there on the internet.
Which is crazy,
because he's just not as good as a number one guy as Jason Tatum is. But we're going to get the opportunity to see it, and those people are going to be either going to be proven very right or very wrong this upcoming season, because I don't think there's going to be a middle ground. It's either he's going to be really good as a number one option, or you're going to find out pretty quickly that he's better served as a guy who benefits from having a number one like Jason Tatum.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, going back to this Bane and Edie for Jaylen Brown, either graded or rank it on a scale 1 to 10.
F.
Like, it's just straight F. Straight F is how
I fucking hate this trade. Yeah, I hate this trade. I don't want Desmond Bane on the Celtics side. I'm not a fan of him. Zach Edey, I think he so overrated. I don't even know if he's overrated, because I think most people he kind of just sucks.
He's just fine.
Yeah, I like the first deal a lot better, where we just do what I want to do. If we're gonna trade Jaylen Brown, to give us all the cap flexibility possible, you get some amazing picks there.
Give Brad a chance to
give me Reed Shepard though. I need Reed Shepard in that deal.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I got one more Jaylen Brown one in here, and this one is a bit of a hodgepodge. So we'll see what we feel about this one. This is and this is what might happen a lot this year. Is a lot of 4-team trades. I don't. This one is probably the least realistic, and I'll be honest, I just don't even love it. But it's hard to find a Jaylen Brown trade that makes sense for everybody, right? Like, it just really is, unless you're committed to doing it. And as I found out from doing this exercise, not super committed to doing it, so it made it a little bit harder to find. So here's a 4-team trade I got. It's the Hawks, the Celtics, the Bulls, and the Pistons. So the Hawks get Jaylen Brown. So Jaylen Brown going back home to Atlanta. They're going to pair him up with Trae Young. The Bulls are going to get George Niang, Sam Hauser, also going out in this deal. The Pistons are going to get Kobe Buffkin. They're just kind of needed in here to make some salaries work. Again, this is going to be a trade where there will be picks thrown around, but here's hypothetically what the Celtics would get back from a player perspective. Number one, this deal saves them $20 million. What it does is it also resets the Celtics' depth on their roster. It doesn't necessarily bring back a star, but it will reset their roster depth, and then they'll get some draft picks on the end. So here's the players I have coming to the Celtics. It's Terrence Mann, Massachusetts guy, Onyeka Okongwu, Lonzo Ball, Paul Reed, and then probably about 2 to 3 picks in there. The ones I have right now is a 2027 Milwaukee unprotected pick, 2029 Atlanta unprotected pick. Those are both coming from Atlanta, so not bad there. And you can dig through all the different draft picks and kind of add in what you need to make that work. So this is a poo-poo platter of just rebuilding roster depth and then giving you more versatility. This basically gets you under that second apron, so it doesn't do quite as much damage as that Rockets deal does, where it's like 40+ million and you're just good. You're just in a much, much better state here going forward. And then when you think about, even if you don't move Porzingis, you still got 30 more million that's coming off the books next year. If you can't find something to do with that, you're not forced to do something. So gives you depth for the upcoming year, and then a little bit of flexibility to figure out what the future looks like. I think, in my opinion, from the player perspective, I've always liked Terrence Mann. Didn't really work out all that great after that trade from the Clippers, but I think that's a guy that could have some value in the Missoula system. And I think Okongwu is probably the biggest player transaction. Definitely not a big enough player to headline a package, but when you're getting all these different guys, plus draft picks, plus cap relief, it tries to hit as many of those, points in the manifesto that I laid out.
Yeah, I mean, Okongwu is the centerpiece in that deal
Yeah.
for me because you get your center of the
Oh,
future
no
there.
doubt.
I've always liked Okongwu a lot. I think I was early on the Okongwu is basically just Bam Adebayo. Maybe an inch one way or the other, taller or shorter. I'm not really sure, but I like the way that he plays. I think that he has a lot of value in today's NBA. He'd probably maxes out as a 4, though. I don't know that he's necessarily a 5, but we've seen Al Horford, who like doesn't have the size of a true 5 in the NBA. Al
Right.
Horford's 6'9.5". I think a Kongwu, would be kind of filling in the same shoes there. But he's the player. I don't care for Terrence Mann, Lonzo Ball. Who knows how long his knee's gonna
Right.
hold up? B-ball Paul, not much of a
I
guy.
mean, honestly, most of that's just salary to
Yeah.
try to get there, right? With guys that potentially make sense to be on the move. Like it's
Yeah.
mostly a Okongwu. It's $20 million off the books, and it's 3 to 4 picks. That's
And that
really the crux of the deal.
Milwaukee 2027 pick is a really nice pick to have,
Right.
especially
Exactly.
unprotected. And I think that Atlanta 2029 pick could be good. It could be bad. I would bet on the
Mhm.
franchise just not being great as a franchise. So Jaylen gets to go home. I think that's cool seeing him playing in Atlanta. And this, also makes next year's pick potentially great. And that's a
Right.
huge part of this is that I don't think we've really talked about this, but the Celtics own their pick next year,
Mhm.
and AJ DeBonsa's the prize. And I think it would be cool to have a kid from Massachusetts
Right.
playing for the
That would
Celtics. It'd be
well,
great.
so in that same vein, because I've seen this in the chat and it's been brought up before, going back to Kevin O'Connor, he talked about a report that the Celtics met with Cooper Flag.
Mhm.
Apparently this is a pretty common practice that like teams meet with guys just for like down the road. And it's Cooper
Yeah.
Flag, Maine kid. His mom famously, showed him Larry Bird tapes all the time growing up. He went to Duke. He wants to emulate. He's said in multiple interviews that he wants his offensive game to be Jason Tatum. So clearly he has an
Mhm.
affinity for the Celtics and quasi
Can't
hometown
see
team.
can't see Cooper Flag shooting that many sidestep threes.
Yeah, that maybe everything but that. Maybe everything but that. But what did you think of all this? Did you think it was just a clickbait thing from KOC, or do you like? Because I can't imagine
Yes, it
Nico
was.
just got given this gift of the number 1 pick after making the most insane trade in NBA history, and then is going to trade Cooper Flag. Nobody's that crazy.
I mean, he said it on the pod pretty much through laughter, and like he clearly
Right.
wasn't. He knew that this was just something that Yahoo Sports was probably like, "Hey, KOC, like we really want people to listen to this episode. Can you just put this in the
Yeah.
title?" So yes, clickbait. But who knows? Like once it's out there, like everything that
Yeah.
happens in the world was originally a thought in somebody's brain. So maybe that's what happened. But I got to give a quick shout to Rob version 1. He has a JB trade in the chat. He says JB trade with Dallas and San Antonio. Boston gets Flag, Vassell, Sohan, and picks. Dallas gets Castle and number 2. Spurs get JB. I'd have to think about this a little bit more. I feel like Celtics are probably getting too much in this deal.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Because it's
Yeah.
just getting Flag alone. Honestly, we might have to attach picks to JP to just because of and that might be a stretch, but it's the upside in the future and the value of what that contract is. Like that would
Maybe it's just
be
the
a
Celtics pick
tough
next
one.
year.
Yeah, something to that effect. The Cooper Flag thing is tough for me. I think the Spurs on their own, because I'll say this, Rob, to your point, once this Cooper Flag thing came out, I tried trading JB to Dallas. For them to make the room for this, they basically got to like trade, so many of their guys. Like this works because the Spurs are sending out, all their stuff, and JB goes to San Antonio. But San Antonio is a team that I think just one-on-one could potentially, there could be some stuff there. I think I have them with a Drew Holiday trade that I think is a little bit interesting. They'd probably be more into JB now. This actually gets to a pretty good point where the Spurs have been closely linked to whatever's going to happen with Giannis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of the teams that miss out on Giannis, those packages slightly trimmed down just a little bit. Those could be teams that are like, you know what, fuck it, we're already kind of like committed to like we want to get a guy, and JB's clearly not Giannis, but he's a step and a half below Giannis. And so depending on, back to the Rockets point of where you think you actually are as a 2 seed, or the Spurs post getting Fox and not really getting a chance to see him and Wemby together. And now, because of the blood clot issue, like, does JB actually put you in the West is super tough. So if you're a West team, you better really think JB's putting you, in that top tier mix. Like, those are teams where I think it could get interesting if they really get fixated on Giannis, feel disappointed, and then try to pivot to JB. Like, maybe those teams will overpay enough that the Celtics have to consider it, but I don't know. Just something to think about.
I just can't see a team of De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, and Wemby just like figuring out how to play basketball together. There's just something like I just don't think that.
I just don't think
would
it's enough. Like
necessarily
because
work
if they're
out.
giving up, whatever they have to give up to get there. So in this case, just using the one in the chat here, Vassell, Sohan, and just Castle, and then they're also giving away their number 2 pick. Like, that's 4 pretty decent assets, at least, especially Castle and number 2. Like, those are really nice assets that you're kind of giving away, and there might be some other picks involved, and whether or not you, I know you and I are.
Vassell sucks. Sohan sucks.
No, but here's the thing. I think Sohan's good on defense, so I think he's good from that perspective as a role player. Like, I think he's fine there. But Vassell, I'm fine with that. But you want his salary because you want to feel good about trading something that's $27 million. Like, that's a nice salary to be like, listen, we have him here. He's okay for us. But if a move comes along, we have no problem getting $30 million to get to where we need to get to, right? Giving that up is like, that's the asset part of Vassell that I don't think they'd want to give up, like, right? Because I think that takes them out of so many other trades that might be available, because now you're stacked with the Wemby, Fox, and Jaylen Brown, and those are going to be tougher to make another deal. Where Vassell, you throw in all your picks, you throw in your young guy, you get a lot more in there. So it's an interesting market, man.
I'm not a Vassell guy. I've seen him enough in person in San Antonio. Every time I see the guy play, I'm just like, this guy kind of sucks. And I feel the same way about Sohan. So maybe it's just I've gone to the wrong games, but every time I see those guys play, I'm just not a fan.
Yeah, Sohan is like a $10 million role player. I'm fine with that. Like, he could be one of these Pacers guys that plays one game, doesn't play the next game. Like, I totally see that for Sohan, where he changes the game, and then the next game maybe it's like, yes, this isn't a Sohan game. He's not in there. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But anything else on the JV market here? Just, I mean, like you said, we're begrudgingly going through this practice right now. Like, there isn't a trade out there that, at least right now, and this is the part of the unknown again that we keep coming back to, is maybe Brad has something out there that we're like, didn't think about that. And all of a sudden that changes the way you're thinking about it. But I think for me, this is the least likely option of all the scenarios that we're going to go through. And this would be the one that I think would be the most surprising. And I really don't expect Jaylen Brown to be moved this offseason.
I mean, there's a reason this episode is titled "Why the Celtics Cannot Trade Jaylen Brown." I don't want to trade Jaylen Brown whatsoever. And it seems like Jaylen Brown doesn't want to be traded either, because Noah Dalzell was out at his pop up yesterday, and she was saying that Jaylen stayed there for 5 hours and he was talking to fans. It was a rainy day. People were waiting in the rain, and Jaylen was scheduled to be there for 30 minutes, and he ended up staying 5 hours because he wanted just to give, show love to the city and saying that he's going to be more involved in the community than he has been in the past. And that's the reason why, like, as much as Jaylen's game sometimes can frustrate fans, like, he's perfect for the city of Boston. He's exactly the type of guy that the city of Boston needs. And he deserves the opportunity to get a chance to play as the number 1 guy for this franchise next year. And like, if we don't give him that opportunity, to me, that's just as bad as trading Isaiah Thomas. Like, it's like, you give the guy his shot, allow him the opportunity to prove his worth.
Yeah. And we've doubted his ceiling before, and he's always kind of found a way to kind of rise above that. So, maybe at the end, this is a weird blessing that, Jaylen Brown gets a chance to level up as a number 1 option. And then when Tatum comes back, he's all the better for it. He's a better playmaker. He's better, having to step up in those moments where Jason Tatum rolls an ankle or doesn't have it. Maybe it is for the better. And ultimately, Greg, I just feel like I can't imagine the era of the Jays ending without you giving a chance for Jason Tatum to come back from injury, and you get one more chance to see what this looks like, because we know if you just have the two of those guys, and all we need to know is how healthy, what Tatum's going to look like. And it's a mystery, but given his age and given, he had the surgery from the same guy, which Durant is the best case scenario, and he was far older than Tatum when he came back. So you take all of those factors in, and I just think you have to at least see it on the court again before you definitively break it up and you try to go all these other angles that we're going to talk about. So with that, we will leave you guys there. We're going to come back later in the week, next couple of weeks here. We'll have it spaced out. So this was our Jaylen Brown scenario. Down the road, we're going to take a look at Drew Holiday. We're taking a look at Kristaps Porzingis. We're going to take a look at Derek White. And I don't want to do that. Derek White's my guy, but that might be the best value out there. So we'll at least take a look at it because the door's open. You never know. And then we'll kind of take a look at everybody else, the Sam Hausers, the Luke Cornett's, Al Horfords. We'll kind of group them all together. So episode by episode, we'll take a look at those. And, I'll be popping in for those. And Greg may have a few things going without me here, as I'm still kind of in and out here with the birth of my my new baby girl here. So we are going to keep the episodes coming, keep the content coming. We got you guys covered. We appreciate you guys rocking with us over here. As always, make sure you guys are following us across all of our social media, Zach Green MV Pod. You guys have trades that you want us to talk about? Send it to us. Hit us up in the DMs. Send it to celticsnoise@gmail.com. celticsnoise@gmail.com. Go ahead, send us some of your trades. Send us the screenshot. Maybe we'll use that and talk about it. We'd love to have kind of a fan trade that we can talk about each week. So if you guys do have that, definitely hit us up. Greg, good seeing you again here back in the square. I haven't been able to do it as consistently, obviously, but it's great still getting a chance to pop on the mics and actually have my mic this time, so I don't hopefully sound like the Cookie Monster.
So excited you have your mic. Yeah, no, this was great, man. Happy to have you back.
All right, guys. We appreciate you guys. Enjoy the playoffs. We'll keep checking in with you here, and we will be back later this week. Peace.